A Map of Thought, Episode 31, Thomas Piketty. Here is a sentence that fits on a napkin and still managed to become one of the most argued about ideas in modern economics. When wealth grows faster than the economy around it, the people who already have wealth get relatively richer forever, unless something forcibly interrupts them. Thomas Piketty spent over a decade compiling the historical data to prove that sentence is not just theory. It is close to the default setting of capitalism, unless deliberately corrected.
Let us start with that core equation, because it gets referenced constantly and explained badly almost as often.
The shorthand is R is greater than G, and once you unpack the two letters, it is genuinely simple. R stands for the average rate of return on capital, what wealth already invested in stocks, real estate, and businesses typically earns each year. G stands for the growth rate of the overall economy, roughly how fast average wages and total economic output expand each year. Piketty's central finding, built from centuries of tax and inheritance records across multiple countries, is that historically, R has almost always run higher than G, often significantly higher, for long stretches of history. Here is why that gap matters enormously, even though it sounds like a small technical detail. If your wealth is already large and mostly invested, it tends to compound at that higher rate, R, year after year, regardless of how hard you personally work. If your income mostly comes from a salary, it tends to grow closer to the economy-wide rate, G, which is typically slower. Run that gap forward across decades, and inherited wealth systematically pulls ahead of earned income, not because of any single dramatic event, but simply through the quiet, compounding mathematics of one growth rate consistently beating another.
Give us the historical sweep that actually demonstrates this, because a formula alone will not convince a skeptical listener.
Before the sweep itself, it is worth appreciating just how unusual the underlying research project was. Piketty and a team of collaborators spent well over a decade compiling tax records, inheritance filings, and wealth surveys stretching back as far as the late 1700s in some countries, across France, Britain, the United States, and beyond, building a dataset of a scale and time depth that simply had not existed before in economics. Most economic arguments about inequality, up to that point, relied on relatively short runs of post-war data. Piketty's genuinely distinctive contribution was insisting on looking back across centuries, because a pattern that only shows up over a century is invisible if you only ever look at the last 20 years. The story that data actually tells runs through some genuinely dramatic swings. In the decades before the First World War, a period often called the Belle Epoque in France and the Gilded Age in the United States, wealth inequality reached staggering levels. In parts of Europe, a small sliver of families, largely through inheritance rather than active enterprise, controlled an enormous share of all private wealth, and Piketty's data shows this concentration had been building steadily for generations, exactly the kind of slow, compounding pattern the R greater than G logic predicts. Then came a genuinely unusual historical interruption. Between roughly 1914 and 1945, two catastrophic world wars, the Great Depression, and the high wartime taxation that followed, physically destroyed enormous amounts of accumulated capital through bombed factories, collapsed markets, and currency devaluation, while simultaneously funding extremely high tax rates on income and inheritance to pay for those wars. The result was a genuinely dramatic, historically unusual compression of wealth inequality across the middle of the 20th century. Piketty's provocative argument is that the relatively equal, broadly prosperous middle-class societies many people in wealthy countries came to think of as simply normal were actually the historical exception, produced by an extraordinary, violent disruption, not the natural steady state of capitalism left to run on its own.
And his argument is that this exceptional period has been quietly ending.
That is exactly his claim, and it is the part that generated the most public attention. Since roughly the 1970s and 80s, as top tax rates were reduced across many wealthy countries and capital markets grew increasingly globalized and financially sophisticated, Piketty's data shows wealth concentration climbing back up substantially, in some measures approaching levels last seen before the world wars. His argument is that the mid-20th century's relative equality was never a natural, permanent achievement of capitalism maturing. It was a temporary historical accident produced by two world wars and their aftermath, and once the specific political conditions that produced high taxation and capital destruction faded, the underlying R greater than G mathematics simply reasserted itself.
Give us the everyday version of this dynamic, because inherited wealth compounding for centuries can feel abstract next to an ordinary paycheck.
Here is a version of the arithmetic that tends to land hardest. Imagine an inherited fortune earning a modest average annual return, reinvested rather than spent down, compounding quietly for 30 years with no active labor involved at all. Compare that to a career salary growing through genuine promotions and hard-won raises over that same 30 years. In plenty of realistic scenarios, the passive, inherited pile ends up larger, not because the working career failed in any way, but simply because compounding at a higher rate, applied to a much larger starting base, tends to outrun linear salary growth over a long enough stretch of time. That is not a hypothetical thought experiment. It is close to the literal mechanism Piketty's centuries of data are describing, just compressed down to the length of one working life instead of several generations. Think about two people starting their careers around the same age. One earns a solid salary that grows modestly most years through promotions and cost of living raises, money they largely spend on rent, groceries, and gradually saving whatever is left over. The other inherits a substantial investment portfolio early in life, requiring no active work at all, that simply continues compounding in the background at the market's average return, year after year, regardless of whether that person works hard, works casually, or does not work at all. Over one lifetime, the gap between those two paths might feel manageable. Piketty's point is that this same gap, run across multiple generations of inheritance rather than a single lifetime, becomes the dominant force determining who ends up wealthy in a society, dramatically outweighing individual talent or effort, unless a society deliberately intervenes through mechanisms like inheritance taxation to interrupt that compounding.
This work also received real methodological criticism, and it deserves honest treatment rather than being glossed over.
It absolutely does, and ignoring the pushback would badly misrepresent how this debate actually unfolded. In 2014, shortly after Piketty's book Capital in the 21st Century became an unexpected global bestseller, a journalist at the Financial Times published a detailed critique questioning some of Piketty's specific data transcription and interpolation choices, particularly around wealth inequality estimates for the United Kingdom, arguing several adjustments seemed to push the numbers in the direction that best supported his overall argument. Piketty and his research collaborators responded in detail, defending their broader methodology while acknowledging that any project compiling centuries of historical tax data across multiple countries inevitably involves difficult judgment calls in places where the original records are incomplete or ambiguous. Other economists have raised separate, more technical concerns, questioning whether Piketty's specific measure of the return on capital fully accounts for taxes, depreciation, and reinvestment risk in a way that might overstate how automatically wealth compounds in practice. None of these critiques have overturned Piketty's central historical finding that wealth inequality fell dramatically across the mid-20th century and has been rising again since the 1980s across most wealthy economies. That broader pattern holds up well even among his critics. What remains genuinely contested is exactly how mechanically automatic the R greater than G dynamic is, and how much of rising inequality reflects that specific mathematical relationship versus other separate factors, like changes in technology, global trade, and the specific tax and labor policies each individual country chose to adopt.
Where does this land in live policy? Debates happening right now.
Directly in the center of ongoing wealth tax proposals across multiple countries. Several European nations have experimented with, expanded, or scaled back annual wealth taxes in recent years, watching closely for evidence of whether wealthy residents simply relocate their assets or even themselves to avoid the tax, an outcome that has genuinely happened in some cases and undermined revenue projections. In the United States, wealth tax proposals have become a genuine, if still unresolved, feature of national political debate, with proponents citing Piketty's data directly as evidence that rising concentration requires a deliberate policy correction, and opponents arguing such taxes are administratively difficult to enforce fairly and could discourage productive investment. Neither side has decisively won that argument, and the honest, evidence-based position is that it remains a live empirical and political question, not a settled one. Next time, we bring together nearly every thread this entire series has been tracing: institutions, inequality, and the disruptive power of new technology, in the person of Darren Asemoglu, who asks the question hanging over the whole world right now. As artificial intelligence reshapes labor itself, will it end up building genuinely inclusive prosperity, or simply concentrate power and wealth even further into fewer hands?
See you then.